Joel here in Oregon, and we're gonna show you how to adjust the valves on a Volkswagen Bug real easy. The tools required are your valve cover gaskets. If you need them, it's always a good idea to change them. Flathead screwdriver, a 6/1000 feeler gauge, 13mm wrench, 13mm socket on a ratchet. Okay, moving on over to the Beetle. I have a 1600 here that we're working with in my 1960 convertible. Your engine should be very similar. The first thing to do is make sure that you're on number 1 cylinder. I like to start at number 1 cylinder and sequentially work my way around. So I've put the engine on what I believe is number 1, and now regardless of where your distributor is, on mine number 1 is here. Yours could be here, but on mine it's back here. So I'm on number 1, and my rotor is very important to make sure that your rotor is pointing to the spark plug wire that leads to number 1 cylinder. Okay, so now you know you're on number 1. If you're working with an unknown engine, you're going to find out if there's a problem during the valve adjustment. So the crack in the crankcase is lined up with the notch in the pulley, and my rotor is pointing to my number 1 spark plug wire, which again doesn't matter where it's at on the distributor as long as it's pointing to the number 1 wire and you're on number 1 cylinder. Okay, let's dive under. Taking a look here, this is your number 1 cylinder head and number 1 and 2 side. And so this is your number 1 cylinder intake and exhaust. This is your number 2 cylinder intake and exhaust. You always adjust the intake and the exhaust at the same time. So as my friend at Global Foreign Car, Mel, once showed me, you want to turn the engine over just like this a little bit, or have a friend do it, while you're making sure there's no movement on that valve in question. So you see, number 1 is not moving, neither in the intake or the exhaust. So that means it's ready for adjustment. Okay. So before you do anything, you just check them, because if they're already good, you're not going to adjust them again. So you want to make sure you have clearance. Not too little, not too much. So I've got perfect clearance here, and I've got good clearance here because I've just adjusted these valves. So what you're going to do is you're going to use your feeler gauge, unless you're absolutely sure you like them where they're at, and you're just going to run your feeler gauge through there and make sure that they're right where you want them. Looks like my exhaust valve is just a little tight, so I'm going to use my socket, and I'm just going to break that 13mm nut loose a little bit. Then I'm going to have to hold that lock nut with my wrench while using my flathead screwdriver to back off that adjustment. So you just want to back off that adjustment just a little bit. Now I'm going to have to set the phone down so I can hold that wrench steady while I back that adjustment screw off just a little bit. Okay, I backed that off. A little bit. And so now we're just going to tighten it back up. Just snug it, don't go too tight, and check it again. Okay, now that's much better. Then you can go ahead and tighten it up. You don't have to be too tight. And so all I did was loosen the lock nut, adjusted the adjustment screw, and then tighten the lock nut. And then now I've got my feeler gauge can slide through there without getting stuck. Not too loose, not too tight. Then you want to just go ahead and make sure your intake and your exhaust is tight. And this side is done. Number 1 cylinder is done. And now we're going to rotate the engine counterclockwise 180 degrees, and then we'll be on number 2 cylinder. Okay, you see that? Now we're on number 2 cylinder, and my rotor is pointing to my number 2 spark plug wire. Yours could be anywhere. So I could turn the engine over just a little bit and verify that 1 is moving now and number 2 cylinder is not moving, so it's ready for adjustment. And we'll start by checking it. Perfect. Perfect. Now, it's important that if you have no clearance at all, that you adjust your valves immediately. If they're a little bit loose, it's okay. But if you have no clearance, it means your valves are tight and your valve is literally not closing all the way, and you're losing compression and you're going to burn up your engine. So these are both just great. I'm not going to go through, for time's sake, adjusting them because they're great, but I'll show you how that's the way that's supposed to look. That one's a hair loose, but I don't mind it a little bit loose because it's not tight. So number 2 cylinder is good to go. We're going to rotate the engine counterclockwise 180 degrees again, and we're going to line that notch up with the crack, and we're going to come right over here to the driver's side, and I notice my valve cover says Elvis lives. Okay, so now we're on the number 3 cylinder, and we're going to check it. Oh, that's perfect. Perfect. I've got great clearance on both cylinders, and if I needed to, I would loosen that lock nut and I would adjust that adjustment screw until this feeler gauge fit just like that. So it's perfect. We're not going to adjust it. Let's do number 4 cylinder and we're done. We're going to rotate the engine for the last time 180 degrees counterclockwise. And now we're on number 4 cylinder, and my rotor's pointing to number 4 spark plug wire. Yours could be anywhere. Okay, looking at number 4. Perfect. Perfect. You want to make sure you've got some clearance there, especially on number 3 cylinder, because it's hidden in the back, and the air from your fan is restricted from the oil cooler a little bit. Even on the doghouse a little bit. So these are both great. We're done with the valve adjustment. If I needed to, if they were too loose or too tight, I would loosen the lock nut and adjust the adjustment screw. Okay, so that is the valve adjustment procedure. And stay tuned. Like this video. Find me on Facebook. And tell your friends, bookmark this page, come back to it. If there's anything I could do to help you, just shoot me an email, oldbug52@gmail.com. My name is Joel.